Esto es Contraélite. Perfecto. Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches a todos los podescuchas de Contraélite. Estamos hoy conectados con un excelente invitado. Sin embargo, este invitado habla otros idiomas distintos al español y por lo tanto nos vamos a comunicar con él en inglés el día de hoy. Entonces, hoy el episodio va a ser en inglés. Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you all Contra Elite listeners may be. We are super excited today to have a conversation with our guest. But before we let you know what it's all about, Jorge, how are you?
Hey, Vanessa, how's it going? Welcome to everybody, all the podcast listeners. We're very happy to be doing, I think, one of the first South to South, Global South podcasts where we are talking with what we think is victims of imperialist aggression. So I think we're kind of sick of hearing like Western media narratives only pushing one narrative to justify their interests. So I think we're trying to break and making our modest contribution in providing a different narrative and point of view regarding what's going on in the world right now.
That's right. And this episode in particular has been like months and years in the making. We have been trying and trying to get a time to speak with our guest today. So I'm super excited, and it's finally a reality. So a little bit of context: it's been exactly 14 years since on October 20th, 2011, Colonel Gaddafi was brutally murdered by Islamic jihadists backed by NATO. Curiously enough, current Secretary of State Marco Rubio posted on his X account back in 2019 a picture of a bloodied Gaddafi next to Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, kind of predicting his demise as well back then. Today, we have around 10,000 U.S. troops and all kinds of naval ships, bombers, and military planes off the coast of Venezuela, prompting a regime change operation against the Maduro government. With a 400% Venezuelan inflation today, around 10% to 50% of the Venezuelan population who has emigrated in the last 10 years, and many of the same human rights, democracy, and now a fight against drug cartels rhetoric, we wanted to explore certain parallelisms between the 2011 NATO bombing of Libya and the current siege against Venezuela. So today we are honored to have Mustafa Fetouri, who is an award-winning Libyan journalist, columnist, author, and translator with contributions to major outlets like Middle East Monitor, Al Monitor, and Washington Report, and a focus on Africa and the Sahel region. So, a really warm Contra Elite welcome to Mustafa Fetouri. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be with you. I'm very, very sorry that we could not make it earlier and we could not make it last year, as you have mentioned, but I'm extremely pleased to be with you.
And we are very honored to have you, Mustafa. And you are currently in Libya, I believe in Tripoli. So it's very interesting for us and a privilege that you can give us your perspective and some of that historical memory that has occurred against the imperial aggression against Libya. So if you want to start, Vanessa, with the questions.
Yes. So in 2019, Musa Ibrahim, Muammar Gaddafi's spokesperson during Libya's civil war, said that one of the reasons why Libya was attacked had to do with Colonel Gaddafi not building strong enough international alliances to fend off such attack, especially after we also learned, and this continues to be almost blurred out from the historical record that in 2015, the UK Parliament's Foreign Affairs Committee determined that Gaddafi never intended to kill his own people or commit a genocide. So, could you please describe the main reasons as to why you think Libya was bombed by NATO in 2011?
Well, there are, three main themes, if you like, for the invasion of Libya. It's not just bombing, it's actually bombing to help the jihadists and Islamists and other terrorist groups take control of the country and the ground. So the first theme of the invasion or the reason for the invasion of 2011 has to do with Libya itself. Libya as being for the last 40 years or so with the Gaddafi leadership has been completely anti-Western imperialist and the main force around the southern Mediterranean that has always stood up to the United States and the Western hegemonic countries, including France and the UK. And the second theme has to do with Gaddafi's personality and his revolutionary style, if you like, manifesting itself in the support for almost all liberation movements across Africa and Latin America, and probably most of the people, interested people in Venezuela itself, know much about that, as he used to have a very good, very close relationship with the late leader Hugo Chavez. And the third theme has to do with the Libyan position, if you like, or politics vis-a-vis the Palestinian issue for the last 40 years or so. So these are the main themes of the reasons, the real reasons behind the invasion of Libya back in 2011. And under each one of the three themes, as I described it, you have different issues. You know, when it comes to Libya, for example, the Libyan theme, for example, the West has always been very upset, if you like, because Gaddafi, when he came to power in 1969, first thing he did, he kicked out four American military bases out of the country, plus three British military bases, and on top of that, something like 20,000 Italian colonizers who used to be living in Libya after Italy lost the Second World War because it was the occupation power of the country. That's the first thing he did. And the second thing is he took over the oil assets of all foreign companies in 1972, and all oil production, selling and drilling and upstream and downstream became Libyan for the first time. And he was the main force behind raising the oil prices up until the 1973 oil crisis, which most of the people know about. That's in the Libyan side. Of course, he also liberated the economy, whereby equality was the main thing for everybody. Plus, the government have started very large subsidy programs, most of which have ended when he was killed and the regime was changed in 2011. And that subsidy included most people don't pay taxes, they don't pay electricity bills or water bills. Most of the time, there are certain programs for that. And also, the housing sector was heavily subsidized. So, literally, you take a loan from the bank, a mortgage or something, to build a house, and you literally don't pay anything, and just the principal amount itself. You don't pay interest in that. However, and it's usually very long term. When it comes to Africa and Latin America and his support for the liberation movements, as I mentioned, Libya has always maintained very good relations with almost every liberating movement in Africa, starting with Africa, including the fight against the apartheid system, which collapsed in 1993 with the help of Libya. And Libya always stood by, Gaddafi personally always stood by Nelson Mandela, the late Nelson Mandela, when he was still in jail, and everybody was accusing him of being a terrorist. And that's why when Mandela came out, the first thing he did was to visit Libya, to visit Gaddafi personally and thank him. And he said that publicly. The same thing happened with Latin America. He granted a lot of support to the Sandinista in Nicaragua, and then in Venezuela, and then in Peru, and then you name it. I mean, the guy was kind of enthusiastic, steadfast supporter of any liberation movement. And regionally, when it comes to the Palestinian issue, which is the major issue in our area of the world here, he supported almost all Palestinian factions as long as they are fighting against the Israelis in any capacity or form. It doesn't have to be always with the armed struggle. But we used to have a lot of training camps for the Palestinians, as well as other African fighters who were fighting, whether in South Africa, Zimbabwe, in West Africa, and you name it, against the French as well as the apartheid system, and the English, the British as well. And Palestine has always been kind of our, part of our daily life in Libya, including in the school curriculum, all the way to the university. And we have a lot of Palestinians who live here in Libya, just like us. They enjoy everything we enjoy. They get all the services and the help we get from the government. They get it too, just like any other Libyan citizen. So overall, Gaddafi has always been a problem for the Western imperialist forces led by the United States. And of course, what happened in 2011, the invasion of 2011, was actually accumulation of many, many years of bad relationship, confrontation, military confrontation, especially in the in the 1980s and 1990s. When they tried to take over the Libyan shores in the Mediterranean, and it's kind of peaked in 2011. They have been looking, and the Western forces, I mean, they have been looking for a kind of excuse, if you like, to invade the country. They never had that legal and moral excuse before 2011. They tried so many times before, in 96, and 82, and 85, and 84, all the way 2003. But they never really managed to get that, kind of excuse they could market to the world and justify their actions until 2011, when they successfully marketed the false claims that Gaddafi was killing his people, and just simply because they don't want him anymore and they want him to leave power. And that's, of course, not the case. That's not true. Especially the situation has also been very bad for France, because it's a former colonial power in most of the African countries, especially in West Africa. And Gaddafi was having those major big plans, for the future of Africa. He was one of the founders of the African Union, and he was very active in the Organization of African Unity, which existed before the African Union. And the African Union actually in 99, in September 1999, was announced in Libya. So the birthplace of the African Union is Libya. And on top of that, he was kind of trying to liberate the African countries from the French influence, especially the economy and the big major French company exploiting most of the African countries, especially in the African Sahel. And he was doing this through investing heavily in major projects, infrastructure projects, mining projects, and so on, communications projects, and agriculture projects in those countries. So they
didn't he even build the largest water hydro project in the world in the desert.
Exactly. And that's Libya. He built the largest man-made river, if you like, from the south of the country across the desert where there's a plenty of water underground in the south, and there's very little water in the north. So we still enjoy the fresh water even today. And that project cost around something like 5 point something billion dollars, and he managed to build it with Libyan money without borrowing a cent from outside the country. And when he was building it, actually in the 1980s, starting in 92 and 1982, up until the last phase in 1995, I think. It was financed by Libyan money. It was a contribution by every Libyan citizen. You have to pay certain taxes on luxury things like air travel and things like that, not the basic things, of course. And solved the problem of the water problem we used to have in Libya. And he tried to imitate the same the same project in the Sahel countries, whereby the Lake of Chad, if you know about it, it's in Chad in the eastern part of the Sahel, has a lot of plenty of water, used to have, not anymore. And the plan was to link the river in Mali to all the way to Chad to create a kind of a blooming desert. It becomes farmers and becomes very productive land. He tried also to help Zimbabwe do the same thing by building the major hydrochloric project over there, over the Zambezi River. And but specifically, he angered France because he was designing the African dinar, African golden dinar. As you know, most of the Western African countries still use their currency, what they call the franc CFA, which is used to be linked to the French franc and then linked to the euro. So their financial policies and implementation of such policies are not completely free from France. France can do everything it wants to do in those countries like Senegal, Mali, Niger, and you name it, because the French central bank actually controls the money, controls the cash. What Gaddafi was trying to do is to replace that with an African golden dinar backed by the assets of golden assets of Libya and South Africa, because we have a lot of gold under him. We used to have a lot of gold, the country, I mean, and the central banks, and you always need gold to back a very strong currency. So the French really were very, very, very angry because of that. And that's why they ganged up and they actually led the invasion of the country in 2011.
I think there was even a reference to something like that on the WikiLeaks cable from Hillary Clinton, that she was doing Sarkozy a favor by promoting that invasion. So it's like the banality of evil. So like a favor. So, but I just, before we continue, I just wanted to clarify one thing, because, and I agree with everything that you said. The historical record is there for people to see who doesn't want to buy this polluted Western propagandistic narrative about a Gaddafi government. But I think for me, what seems to be a little bit confusing is that from 2003, from the invasion of Iraq onwards, it looks like there was a pragmatic shift in Gaddafi's and his entourage thinking, that he tried to court Spain, France, and the UK. You also have his sons visiting London schools of economics. So he wanted to make what I think were some kind of overtures for business reasons. I don't know. And as we see now, Sarkozy is in jail because of the campaign financing. I'm very happy about that. So, but I don't know, what do you imagine what he thinking? He was just trying to be pragmatic, because I think if we look at another villain in the geopolitical world, Lukashenko, he tried to do something similar with Mike Pompeo, and that came to bite him in the butt, because then they tried to oust him. Do you think he was trying to be pragmatic and kind of open up, and then they took advantage of that and they saw it as weakness? What do you think?
Well, I think it is, yeah. I mean, very much the way you put it. I mean, uh, as Libyans, we know very well that Gaddafi, as a person and a politician and leader, never really trusted the West, but he always recognized the fact that Libya is a very small country, strategically located, and doesn't really have the means to be in constant confrontation with the West, especially the United States, throughout the most of the last 40 years, if you like. I mean, the broachment between Libya and the West started around 1999 and all the way. And I personally believe what Gaddafi was trying to do is, of course, being pragmatic, and he is also trying to save the country. He's trying to rebuild the country again after the sanctions were lifted that were imposed on Libya for about 10 years by the United States, around 20 years, and by the UN Security Council, a complete 10 years. And he was he was trying to be very pragmatic by saving the country and focusing on rebuilding inside Libya most of what has been destroyed because of the sanctions, decades of sanctions. And at the same time, I think he was a little bit misled to believe that he can trust the West a little bit, and that's why he started the opening up of the policy of opening up of the economy and other activities, including the educational sector and not communication, no, the oil sector, and probably he missed the point that those people, the Western imperialist leaders, I mean, they never give up, and they always seek revenge at one point when they get the chance to get revenge, and including if they have the possibility to murder you. And of course, they tried to kill Gaddafi many times before, either directly or indirectly. So, was it miscalculation? Probably, I would say a little bit of miscalculation. Was it also a little bit of over trust of the Western imperialist forces like the United States and France and the UK? I would also give it around 20% also. Was it also a kind of misunderstanding that the geopolitics of the world has changed, not really in the way the Western country wanted it, but actually in the opposite way. And that's why we have seen the emergence of people like Sankara in the 1980s and Uganda Burkina Faso, I'm sorry. And then along comes people like Chavez and Maduro after him. But then, if you look at the balance of power at the time at the world level, you see Russia, which could be counted on as a friend or supporter or whatever. Actually, the Soviet Union was collapsing, and Russia itself was collapsing until Putin came to power. So all these, mixed together, probably gave Gaddafi a kind of not very clear picture of what's going on around him, and he probably took, I would say, the wrong turn by a little bit trusting the Western forces and opening the country for them. But eventually, as I mentioned before, the West did not have the moral and legal framework or justification
Yeah.
to do what they did in 2011 until 2011. But all the years before that, it escaped them. It was very difficult to obtain that.
No, I completely agree, and I think, but it's very easy to make this analysis after so many years have passed. But I think he also underestimated, and it's actually interesting that I remember there was one time a meeting with Latin American presidents, and the late President Hugo Chavez was mentioning a conversation he had with Gaddafi back in 2010, I believe, or when he went to Margarita Island for this African Union Summit in Latin America, and he said that Gaddafi told him, hey, France and the UK want me to invest my international reserve in their countries because they're still suffering from the financial crisis. And then look what happened after the invasion. All of the Libyan reserves were completely confiscated and frozen. And I believe until today, they never returned them to you. So I think that I don't think he put two and two together, because who was thinking in those terms? These countries were thinking like this, but maybe he didn't.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, including the conversation you just referred to with Hugo Chavez, and I remember when the late Chavez came to Libya for a visit, I think 2009. He spoke publicly, and he gave a very long speech in Tripoli, and one of the things he kept repeating is that he kept saying, "My brother Gaddafi, don't ever trust the West. Don't ever trust them. Don't ever think that they become your friends." At the time, Libya was just the wave of opening up the country was as its height, and that's in 2009, I think, and everything was going smoothly. But the planning behind the scenes never stopped to actually get rid of him.
Exactly. So on that point, I just wanted to elaborate real quick before Vanessa comes to the next question. How was the Libyan economic situation back in 2011? Because from what you're saying and from what I've read, Libya had the highest GDP per capita from all African countries, and yet they engineered this proxy rebel army, Libyan Transitional Council from Benghazi. Can you explain how did that come about?
Well, the economic situation of the country when all the trouble started was as at its best for the last 40 years or so. I mean, I would say, the best period of economic growth, development, building, and everything. And between, the best period we had after the late 1970s, before the troubles got worse with the West in the early 1980s. So Libya was turned in 2011, when everything started, in February 2011, Libya was like a huge workshop where everything is being rebuilt, everything, including in the capital and other cities, completely new cities were being built, completely new farmland being dug and prepared, and complete communications companies are being set up, and new programs for supporting the Libyan people, in terms of subsidies for almost everything, including private cars. You would get a loan from the bank to buy a private car without paying any interest in that. So the situation was actually not the best of time to revolt, if there's any reason to revolt against Gaddafi. It was the worst of time because everything was going very fine. The sanctions were lifted, and relations with the West has improved tremendously. Gaddafi himself visited the UN for the first time in 40 years. Before that, before 2009, when he came to when he went to the United Nations General Assembly meeting in September of that year. It was the first time for him that the Americans gave him visa to go to New York and join the meeting of the General Assembly. So everything was going very well. A new university was being built, and thousands of housing units, a new infrastructure for water pipes and electricity and communications, you name it. And you have to remember, Libya is a very big country. It's not very small. It's a very fast country. Our GDP per capita was the highest in Africa at the time. Libya completely eradicated illiteracy, so every Libyan was able to read and write. And the Human Development Index of the United Nations says so. I mean, the best health system and healthcare we had then, free of charge, of course. Education is free of charge. Most of
No external debt. You didn't have external debt. You didn't owe any money to anybody.
Zero debt. And it's amazing. Even the man-made river I told you about, we never got any debt because of that. That usually for huge projects to finance them, countries do borrow money from outside. But he never did. He never borrowed a penny from outside. And we never had any debt up until 2011, zero. It was, I think, the only country in the world that would zero debt. And, anyway, and it was actually surprising, for the majority of Libyans that somebody would believe that it's time to remove Gaddafi. I mean, you could have done that at the worst times in the 1980s and 90s, and when the country was in a very difficult situation economically, socially, and the education system, you name it, services, it was terrible. But not after 99. I mean, it became a completely different country.
No, and they didn't want they didn't want to hear you. They didn't want to hear Libyan people. They only wanted to hear Libyan expatriates in the US or other countries.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I mean, it was. I was in Libya throughout the war and before the war, of course, and I only left after that. And I was surprised to when I hear what they are reporting in the major networks like CNN and BBC, you name it, Al Jazeera, and actually, they were telling stories about Tripoli in certain neighborhoods in Tripoli, which I know very well, including my own. neighborhood, and they are saying people are being killed and shot in the street, but there's nobody is being shot here. I mean, I know Tripoli, all the way around the city, and they never saw anything. There were small demonstrations, anti-government demonstrations, but they were small ones, very limited to certain neighborhoods of the capital. But then the media was actually saying the majority of people are demanding that Gaddafi should leave power. But that's not true. I mean, it was a surprise even to us in the capital here in Tripoli. And I remember one of the things I remember is the only honest actually ambassador, Western ambassador at the time was a friend of mine, and that's the ambassador of Canada. She was a very nice lady, and she never believed in what the media was saying. And I remember she used to call me every now and then, and February, March 2011, when everything started before she left the country. And, she was kind of disbelieving this. Well, I mean, what the TV says is not true because she can see it in the ground. It's not true. And unfortunately, when she went back to Canada, because she was writing, that's a very interesting story because the Canadian Foreign Ministry was asking her about what's happening in Libya. And every time she sends a report to the Foreign Ministry, she says everything is quiet, there's not much trouble, there's no shooting or firing or anything. And the ministry is not believing it, the reports. So they called her back, and she went back, and she was. Kind of suspended from the foreign ministry for some time because of what she was saying about Tripoli. And
Because she was telling the truth. Because she was telling the truth.
exactly, because she
And
was telling the truth. And it took her about another 3, 4 years to be reinstated, and then went back to, I think she served in another African country before retiring.
that is so infuriating, that role that the media does play and continues to play through throughout these different operations of imperialism and neo-colonization. And I think that we are seeing this right now, this parallelism or the tie with what's happening with Venezuela. And there's all these elements kind of aligning. And you know, for me, I I don't like the current government in Venezuela, the Maduro government. I think there's been a lot of corruption and things that just haven't come to fruition, and people are unhappy about the economic situation. And so there's that. And I think that the elections last year do come into questions because there were a lot of things that weren't like in the past, as far as like the final tallies and all of these different things. That reality can be true, but there is also this manufacturing of a narrative that's going on with the numbers of immigrants. And especially, I thought it was really interesting that the Venezuelan nationals are being highlighted or were being highlighted in the US as like the group, like the Tren de Aragua. They're causing all these problems and this is going on. And then the strikes that have happened to these boats, these small boats that are allegedly carrying drugs into the United States. But that doesn't even make sense with the official like UN DOC reports on drugs and like the flow of drugs into the United States, like how that is usually through the Pacific routes and not through Venezuela. So it really doesn't make any sense. And then all these other elements, and then the Nobel laureate being named as Maria Corina Machado, and that not being expected. And I thought it was so interesting, the reaction of the United States, it's highly polarized. So a lot of people who would consider themselves liberals were like, "Oh, this is amazing! It's such a snub against Trump because he was like supposed to get the Nobel Peace Prize and all of this." And then Maria Corina comes around and says, "Oh, well, I dedicate this to Trump, and this is kind of like a shared win." And then he relishes in that and speaks out about it. And so then uh, there's a the situation in Venezuela is not completely unstable. It's becoming better. There are many indicators that show that things are improving. It's not this image that we have of 2016, right after the sanctions, that there's like scarcity and people are really desperate, and it's this humanitarian crisis. I'm not saying that it's completely better because sanctions do have a lot of negative effects, but this has prompted Venezuelans to start, they start their own business. They start developing the agricultural industry. I think that Venezuela is currently producing about like 70 to 80% of its own food, and which was unprecedented before that didn't happen.
It never happened
It had never happened
before
before.
in
We're
like one
reporting
century.
exactly. And so it's like, it's like slowly getting and I'm not saying that this is because of the Maduro government or anything that's like improved this. It's been Venezuelans, like people saving the people. They're saying we have to live, we have to push our country forward. And so I highly commend Venezuelan people for especially those who stayed in Venezuela and continue to fight to for the sovereignty of the country. And so then you have all of these things. You have, the Nobel Peace Prize, the thing about the strikes, the drug trafficking, all of this narrative. And then the United States going through a really difficult moment, polarization, right now with the shutdown that we have, economic situation. I think that we're going into a really rough recession soon. I'm really nervous about the economic situation in the United States. The people are getting fed up with all of this money that we keep sending out to Argentina or for foreign wars, and it's not being invested in our healthcare or in our infrastructure here in the United States. And so everybody's getting is blaming these outside for it. Well, it's Venezuelans, or it's drug trafficking, or it's immigrants, or it's whatever. And so it seems like a key moment to do something in the region that they have a sphere of influence in, distract from internal problems and start grabbing that oil that's there in Venezuela, the reserve and the not just the oil reserves, but also like gold reserves and all these different things. So that's why it's nerve-wracking, and also the American people are not paying attention as much to it. They are distracted with what's going on, the chaos that's going on internally. And so it just seems like it's really aligning to maybe be the perfect moment to kind of try to do something. And then also highlighting the fact that the Libyan oil is, unlike Venezuelan oil, is Libyan oil is light and sweet, whereas like we have this heavier crude oil. But then at the same time, it's so much closer. And when you talk about the refineries and the good jobs for the United States in the refineries that would be, perfect to process this very heavy crude, it's just I really get it's really important for people to be aware and to start connecting the dots and to remember the history, which is why it's so important to come back and say, hey, what happened in 2011? What were the conditions? And so this leads into my next question, which would be, uh, do you see a different geopolitical context now than back in 2011, in terms of NATO, Russia, BRICS, polarized US electorate, as I was mentioning, under the second Trump government?
Do I see a difference, you mean, in the Libyan situation, or?
Well, in a different, I guess, like globally, a different geopolitical
Okay,
context.
okay.
How the different poles. We live in a multipolar world, but we don't want to admit it. And so how do you see the geopolitical context, I guess, now in comparison to 2011? Are there similarities or is it completely different?
Well, there are a lot of similarities and some things are different. I mean, for example, the situation with Venezuela, for example, now reminds everybody, including myself, of Libya in 2011. I mean, uh, many stories were manufactured, as I said before, to justify the invasion and destruction of the country and the murdering of Gaddafi himself. Take that to Venezuela and you find the same thing. And many stores, okay, maybe we disagree with Maduro government or we don't like the guy himself or the elections were not fair and democratic and free. Maybe that's all true. But then they are not just saying this, they are manufacturing a lot of stories with to do with the drugs and him personally being a drug lord, instead of a president of a country and a sovereign state. So that's one similarity. The other similarity, of course, is that we see a kind of increasing U.S. appetite to dominate the world, in a different way. I mean, probably Mr. Trump, when he's in his right mind. He doesn't believe in military confrontations. He believes in transactional policies whereby deals are made and money are made. Maybe that's true. Maybe he's still true to his promises in the presidential campaign when he said that there will be no American involvement in distant, faraway wars, and we don't want wars anymore. And probably he's honest when he's trying to make peace. But that's not the view of the deep state in the United States, which really effectively underground run things. And that's why we saw actually even before he came to power the expansion of NATO eastwards, and most of the Western European countries now are even the former Eastern European countries, which used to be part of the former Soviet Union, are now members of NATO, right, and all the way to the doorstep of Russia. And that is a kind of a shift in the geopolitical balance of power. And there's no way that any kind of justice or peace could prevail in the world if there's only one superpower that dominates the whole world. That's why we see China and Russia and many other countries, including countries in the BRICS, like South Africa, and increasingly Saudi Arabia and the Gulf. Of course, they don't like this kind of imbalance of power, geopolitically speaking, and they try to do something about it, including Iran as well. And how, the kind of dominance the deep US state is seeking, even behind Trump's back, is a kind of a game that goes back to the era of the Cold War, and they still, those guys, who think strategically and see the world through the lenses of the deep state. They still believe that the U.S. is the only superpower, and they should dominate the world and control everybody else. And that is the price of that is always paid by the smaller nations, smaller countries, weaker countries, and any country that says no to the U.S. I mean, if you look at the situation around Venezuela nowadays, it's a complete mess. I mean, nobody could actually accept the kind of stories being propagated by the Western media, the American media specifically, including coming out of the mouth of the president himself. I mean, And also, it has never been more blatant and scandalous that the president of the superpower, Trump himself, announces publicly that he has authorized the CIA to start operating covertly inside Venezuela. This is this. I mean, what is this? This is a craziness. This guy is lunatic. It's it's completely illegal, anti anything you could think of, and it's a crime, of course. Even according to the United Nations Charter, when meddling in other countries' internal affairs, it's a crime. Okay, Maduro, maybe he's not democratically elected, but that's an issue for the Venezuelan people to decide. It's not for Trump, and it's not for the Nobel Committee to decide that. I mean, I wrote an article about this Machado winning the prize. It's completely, yeah, it's completely unbelievable. I mean, even even if you go back and consider Alfred Nobel's will and what he said about the Peace Prize and who should get it, this lady Machado is completely against that, and she's not in this in this context. She's not democratic. Why? Because she simply represents one side of the debate. So if she wins, what happens to the other people who are against her, who are supporting
I,
Maduro?
I really think she will, if she gets into power, she would like exterminate like 10% of the population. And unfortunately, nobody will care. There will
I
be
mean,
like a lot of killing. And just to real quick, just Mustafa, if you allow me, just and this is what I wonder because Machado, she even before during Chavez there was a coup and she signed like a document saying that she supported the coup. So from the beginning, and she's been receiving money from the U.S. from 2004. It's all documented. But I just wanted to, in your opinion, do you see any different reactions in terms of the institutions? Because as far as I remember, at least it seems there was some kind of pushback by the UN and the legality of it. But this time, I haven't seen it, even when Russia and China are more powerful. So how do you evaluate that? That for me has been a surprise because I thought there was going to be a more pushback, or maybe these countries and these powers are saying, you know what, the international order is dead. Why are we even going to bother? What do you think about that?
well, I agree with you. I don't see any really important institutional pushbacks, against what's happening in the world, and the good example of Venezuela. And I think much of that has to do with the nature of the guy who's the current president of the United States. I mean, you have a guy whose intellectual capacity of understanding the world is very limited. He knows very little about everything else except building and roads and skyscrapers and things like this, and tax evasion, of course, and avoiding to pay taxes. I mean, uh, he probably he doesn't even know where Venezuela is on the map. So I think because of the kind of cloud of fear he has created around the world, inside the United States as well, many countries, including China and Russia, are probably trying to be less confrontational, trying to be more of reconciliatory in tones and talking about geopolitics around the world, including the Venezuelan situation. And I think it will be quite difficult for these countries to defend Venezuela against any American, military action, which I do expect to happen. And it's we don't in today's world, the our understanding of solidarity and support and standing together over, defending the same principles because we shared them, it doesn't exist anymore. Because we actually live in a crazy world, and we have seen the very sad and bloody example in Gaza. I mean, who could have accepted this? I mean, nobody could have accepted this. Yet the Americans not only finance the genocide in Gaza, they actually defend it every day, every morning, every evening, in the news and TV programs, and at the international level, by the president himself and all American staff officials. They always defend what Israel is doing, despite the fact that the rest of the world is saying what Israel is doing is actual genocide. So this is just an example of how things could be, unfortunately, for Venezuela. I'm not really very optimistic when it comes to what this lunatic at the White House might do.
I'm not optimistic either. And just as we're coming to a close with the questions, I wanted to know on a personal level, and you were mentioning solidarity. I completely agree with that. And I just feel so angry about this historical injustice that was done to the Libyan people. What is the current situation in Libya? Are there any kind of regrets in some of the population that may have supported this in the name of democracy? What do you think about living standards
Well,
now, democracy? How do
well,
you see it now?
well, it's beyond regret. It's actually people are not just regretting what happened; they are condemning the moment they believed that removing Gaddafi and the way it happened is going to bring them peace and prosperity in the country and freedom. And Libya is now, went back 30 years back, than it was in 2011. We lost a lot of money. We lost a lot of wealth. We lost a lot of progress that we could have made. Militias are completely roaming the country, especially in the western part, where, including in the capital, where I am. We never had a unified government for the last 14 years. Always there's a potential for fighting, including inside the capital itself. The living costs have risen about 200% over the last 14 years. What you used to pay for like $1 to get, now you have to pay $10 to get the same thing. You used to pay $1 for, say, in 2010. It's everything is collapsing actually, and it's the public sector has inflated beyond the imagination, and a lot of money is going into that, which is a complete waste. We are probably much more corrupt than Venezuela now, and other African countries. And it's we don't have an army, unified army. We don't have a kind of central police station force that reinforces the law. So everything is going down, and outside the capital, especially when you go deeper into Libya, people still have problems with fresh water, have problems with electricity outages. Almost every week there's at least 5, 6 hours without electricity. And the country, actually, the current government we have in Tripoli hardly controls part of the capital itself. And we have almost divided Libya, and we have a parallel government in East Libya run by America, a former American agent, Mr. Khalifa Haftar.
Khalifa Haftar, no?
Exactly,
Yeah.
yes, a military man, and he's an agent of the CIA. And you name it, it's everything is going down. I mean, people not only regret what happened to Gaddafi, they actually are ready to kind of vote in, if there is any fair election, to vote in anybody who represents Gaddafi or who's accounted by them, or their understanding that he's supporter of Gaddafi. And that's why the elections, which were planned in 2021, were cancelled. The main reason, because Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, Gaddafi's son, was about to win that election as a president if the elections went ahead. And until today, we don't have any idea if there will be election. I'm sure there will be no election, presidential election at all. Why? Because Saif al-Islam, Gaddafi's son, is still around and he's very popular and he's going to win it. If there's election tomorrow or next year, so you will have another Gaddafi in power, but this time elected. So because of this, neither the US nor France, the main supporters of the so-called Libyan Spring in 2011, they don't want elections in Libya. Even they might agree to, local elections or legislative elections, but not the presidential, as long as Saif is around. Why? Because he will win it. So the overall atmosphere in the country, or let's say the majority of Libyans, you know, really regret the fact that what happened to Libya. And to prove the point, every year, on the 1st of September, which marks the anniversary of Gaddafi coming to power, on the 1st of September 69, every year they still celebrate it. And and each year there is another city that is celebrating the same anniversary. It used to be one or two around 2012, 2013, 14. Now you have dozens of cities that celebrate the very memory of Gaddafi himself. So it's a complete reversal of what they have been saying, and that's why you don't actually see this in the mainstream media. Yeah, and the only way for the mainstream media who support the so-called Arab Spring in Libya is to ignore Libya completely, unless there is very bad news. They will report it. Otherwise, what they will say, people still support Gaddafi. They don't want to say that.
No, you're completely right, and it's such a tragedy. And this is what strikes me, is that it's never about democracy. That's why I don't understand. I guess I don't understand the frustration and the desperation from people that may hate the government for whatever reasons, but they don't understand that at the end of the day, they're just tools to get someone else's agenda
Exactly.
implemented.
Exactly.
It's never
Exactly.
about democracy. But I just,
Exactly.
before Vanessa asks you the last questions, I just wanted to know what it was really about: oil. So right now, I think probably Italian, French, and British companies are controlling the Libyan oil flow. Is that what's happening?
Well, you could say that, and not really 100% controlling, but they have been taking the lion's share, if you like. And the oil industry itself in the country, the oil sector, because of the infighting and the instability, the political instability, is not progressing as it should be. So we just put it like that. There's a lot of British and American companies around, but the oil sector is not doing as good as it should be because of the inside instability, lack of security, and all this kind of thing. Internal fighting. But they did have a lot of contracts. And Turkey is also coming in as a major influencer of the events in Libya, and a power broker, if you like, on behalf of other NATO countries, of course.
Wow, that's, I mean, I always, it's, I'm more nervous with all of these ties and parallel kind of realities. So to first of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here today, for sharing your insights and that historical perspective that's so important for all of us to keep in mind. And so to close, I wanted to ask you what kind of words of wisdom, words of insight do you have for the everyday Venezuelan people in this uncertain period, and also some words of wisdom, words of insight, recommendations for American people, for people in the U.S. um, who may have a voice or some sort of influence or some sort of way to say something about this situation in this uncertain period?
Well, let's start with the American people. The only thing I would say to the American people is wake up. Wake up. Your country is being controlled by countries, like Israel, who are the creation of the United States. Your money is being bombed out instead of building inside America. Your tax money is actually being used to fund all kinds of terrible things for from which other people suffer. And a very good example of that is Gaza. And just look at how much money did the U.S. Gave Israel, either in cash or subsidies or guaranteed loan guarantees, or of course weapons, to destroy Gaza and help the Israelis commit more genocide. That's for the American people. You have to take your own destiny into your own hands and try to stop lunatic Donald Trump before he becomes a king himself. And it will be very difficult to stop him then. I mean, the guy is clearly having very strong tendency to be a dictator, you know, to be against everything the American Constitution stands for. For the Venezuelan people, I would also urge them to be patient and try to understand what's going on inside their country in light of trying to see the experiences of other nations like Libya. What happened to Libya is bound to happen to Venezuela. I'm sorry to see this, but I can see it. And I don't think that will be for the good of any Venezuelan, including those people who hate Mr. Maduro or dislike his government or policies. I don't think they will be in a better situation, even if this new Nobel laureate becomes a president. I don't think it will be much better. I would urge them not to believe the mainstream Western media, especially the American war media, if you like, with the warmongers around that region. And I would also, urge the Venezuelans to believe in themselves and stand by one another. Solidarity is what you really need at this time, regardless if you are supporting this side of the political debate or that side.
Thank you so much. That is so important to remember, especially about solidarity. That is so needed right now. And as you said, regardless of which side you support. And yeah, for both populations. Uh, where can people find your work? Where can people follow where you are? Do you have anything that you're working on that you would like to speak about? Yeah, where can people follow you?
Well, online, they can find me a lot. They can find me in both English and Arabic, and a lot of my work is being translated into Spanish and French. I would mention a couple of sites I contribute a lot to RT, Russia Today, in English, and the Middle East Monitor, Al Monitors, and as well as Washington Report, a very good magazine in Washington, as well as the New Arab, TNA, And lately, I have been contributing to the left magazines, like the one in Scotland. It's called the Scottish Left Review, and I also had my one of the long readings, if you like, published last week by Bambazoka, which is Bambazoka News. I don't know you know about it or not, but it's a very kind of collective online magazine for the anti-imperialist voices and. Of course, I'm also available in videos. You know, you could find me on sometimes on BBC, sometimes on in Arabic in the local TV stations, and the Chinese CGTN, and many others. So just enter my name into Google search or any kind of search engine, and you will find me.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you. And you are on X as well. A-
Exactly. I
M
am an actor.
Fetouri at M
Yes.
Fetouri. Okay.
Yeah,
So
I'm an accent on Facebook and many others. Yes.
many others.
We
Okay.
will put all of those links on the description of this video. Shukran, Mustafa.
Shukran.
Thanks so
Shukran.
much.
Thank
Thank,
you. Thank you for having me. Pleasure. I wish you all the best.
thank you so much. And thank you so much to everybody who listened to this episode. You can find us on a lot of the social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on X at Contraelite One. Gracias a todos los podescuchas. Nos pueden encontrar en @Contraelite1 en X, en Twitter y en Facebook. Thank you so much. See you next time. Gracias por escuchar Contraélite. Síguenos en nuestras redes sociales por Twitter o Instagram @Contraélite1.